Go ahead.
Go ahead and finish with the rest.
He starts with Frank Phillips next.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That situation, and it didn't end there.
Okay.
Yeah, the bad Frank Phillips really was a brutal deputy sheriff, and he was appointed by Kentucky, the governor of Kentucky, to arrest members of the Hatfield family during this period of time. So he was hounding people, and he was not a nice man either. All of these people during this period of time were not really.
He was a police officer, but he was trying to arrest people. What do you make of that? He was deputized to enforce Kentucky law, and he's trying to arrest people. Hampton.
I'm glad that the speaker there called him a deputy sheriff. He said that
And appointed by the state. He even got that right.
Mm-hmm.
Frank Phillips was a deputy sheriff, Pike County deputy sheriff at one time. And then the governor of Kentucky appointed him to be a state law officer, which really, Frank Phillips is the first Kentucky State Police officer Kentucky's ever had, if you want to look at it. Now, the Kentucky State Police wasn't established until 1948, but Frank Phillips would have been the first police officer with statewide law enforcement authority. Is what he had. He was appointed by the governor.
Uh-huh. But he said he was hounding.
This gentleman here says that Frank Phillips hounded people.
Right.
Well, these are murder warrants, murder indictments. These people have. He was attempting to arrest members of the Hatfield gang.
Right.
This guy, just heard Jack say, they set fire to Randall and Sarah's house, killed 2 more of his kids, beat his wife, and left for dead. But what he says is Frank Phillips and those guys were not nice. When did the Kentucky McCoys or the Kentucky Hatfields ever kill anyone in cold blood or burn someone's house down? When? One time that somebody can name when they killed somebody in cold blood, tied them to trees, shot them when they come out of burning houses, burnt their house. When? Never happened. Go ahead.
Very nice. Then in January of 1888, Jim Vance, the uncle of Devil Anse, perished at the hand of bad Frank Phillips in a West Virginia raid.
Jim Vance perished. He perished. Jim Vance, you'll see the story on the next page when it comes up there. This is Sam McCoy's book once again. I think we used it in episode 1 or 2. And Sam McCoy was there. Sam McCoy was on this posse when Jim Vance was killed. This is an eyewitness. Now, Sam McCoy, you'd have to read the book to know how Sam McCoy was. Sam McCoy had done called some of these guys down because they was ill. This was 6 days after 2 more of Randall's children had been killed. That's his uncle. 2 more of his cousins had been killed, slaughtered, and his uncle and aunt's house had been burnt to the ground, and his aunt had been beat.
Right.
And Sam McCoy was with them on this raid, but these people were upset. And some of them, when they run up on some of these other people in West Virginia, they started to be mean. They were going to treat them the same way that they had been treated or Randall had been treated. Sam McCoy stood up and said, no, if you're going to act like that, I'll get on my mare, his horse, female horse is a mare. I'll get on my mare and I'll go back home. I don't want to be no part of that. You guys said, unless we were shot at, we wouldn't shoot or harm nobody. They said, okay. Sam stayed with them. This is the man that wrote this book. Why would he tell a fib about this next part? He says when they're getting ready to leave, go ahead, babe.
Okay. It should be right here.
Uncle Jim yelled, "Oh!" and then shouted, "Charge them, boys! Rally! Charge them!" Jim Vance was acting like he had a bunch of people in the woods with him, like there was a whole bunch of them. He was trying to fake these guys out. The orders, except the first, were bluff, for there were no boys there to rally except for Cap Hatfield, who flunked and run like a sheep with dogs after it. He did not even shoot one shot, but Uncle Jim was too old to run. She'll show the next page.
Yeah. Now, this is right here from his wife.
This is what his wife said.
This is,
Jim Vance's wife.
mhm.
That was a mistake, for it enabled Phillips to aim his rifle where the old man's head
Mm-hmm.
must
Jim Vance
appear.
had moved around. Let's see if it's in this story here. There's one of them. There it is.
Go ahead.
Right here.
Phillips was no coward and didn't dare danger. I heard a woman holler. Now, this is Jim McCoy, squirrel hunting, Sam McCoy talking here.
Right.
I heard a woman holler, "Hey, boys, who are you and where are you going?" Phillips replied, "Who are you and where are you going?" Phillips was in front. John Yates was next. I was next to Yates. I say, "Frank, I see two men. One has a gun." The two were Jim Vance and Cap Hatfield. Someone back behind says, "Watch out, Frank. There is old Jim Vance." So if Vance had kept still,
Mhm.
he would not have been harmed. Nobody would have seen him. Up till then, no one knew he helped burn the house, page 35. But instead, he waved his left hand and says, "Rally round 'em, boys," and squatted down by a locust tree and brung his gun into play. He fired at Bud McCoy. I suppose then Phillips fired at Vance and Vance at Phillips. Phillips were just getting over a log when Vance fired the second time, and Phillips fell over the log. Phillips said the bullet just fried by his face.
Shoot.
I thought sure Vance had killed Phillips. At this time, Mose Maynard and Dave Plymel were shooting at Vance. He was shot 3 times in his left hip. Vance raised up, though he were going to try to get away. Then he fell. I thought he was dead. But in a moment, I seen his head a-moving and a revolver in his hand. He were trying to shoot Phillips. I don't know if we've got the next page or not, did we?
No, I don't think so. I think,
I think we want to show where Jim Vance was shooting and firing back.
Yeah.
Okay, stop it there.
yeah.
And on that second page there, what it says is that Jim Vance raised up over that log, and as he raised up over the log, Frank Phillips shot him right in the head and said you could see the scalp, blew his hat off, and you could see the scalp of his hair peel back off the top of his head. And he killed him.
Said the hole was the size of an egg.
Yeah. So that's the man that perished, was the man that was shooting at a Kentucky law enforcement posse that was there to arrest him for murdering 2 children, beating an old woman, and burning a house just 6 days before.
Let's see.
And so, of course, Jim Vance and Cap were very tight. Remember, Cap killed Asa Harmon McCoy's son, right? Along with Jim Vance, and then John-C. married Asa McCoy's daughter, Nancy. Remember, we talked about Nancy,
Mhm.
and Nancy, had that confrontation with Jim Vance, and then Cap killed her brother, so she left the Hatfields, went back to Kentucky, and ended up. I'm not sure if she was. I think she actually married Bad Frank. I think Phillips.
Did you notice where he said Phelps? But we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah. He called him that twice. Let's see, this is.
What was interesting, though, is Nancy, being part of the Hatfield family for a little while, Nancy McCoy knew exactly where Cap and Jim Vance went hunting. So Nancy gave Frank Phelps the location of where they hunt.
Wow. Okay. First of all, they were on a hunting trip. Jim and Cap were on a hunting trip. Now, just 6 days earlier, they had mutilated and killed 2 more children, burned a cabin down, beat an old man's wife, but they decide, hey, let's go on a hunting trip. Yeah, let's do that. Once again, he calls Frank, because at the beginning I thought maybe that was a mistake.
Right.
Frank Phelps.
Well, you may, yeah.
Now he calls him again Phelps.
Yeah.
It's Phillips, Jack. He's from Phelps. Okay, sorry.
Don't make it
He's from Phelps, Kentucky. Frank Phillips was from Phelps, Kentucky, but his name is Phillips.
right.
They were not on a hunting trip. They were out hiding in the woods. They didn't want to stay home. Just like Asa McCoy had hid in a cabin instead of staying. Thank you, baby. Had hid in a cave to keep from his family being retaliated against. Frank or Jim Vance and Cap were out hiding in the woods behind the house. They were coming from Jim Vance's house. In that book, they had just left Jim Vance's house.
Right.
The lady that come out of the holler there was Jim Vance's wife. That said, "Where you going, boys, and what do you want?" And she said it real loud, screaming, "Hey, boys, where you going? What do you want?" She wanted Jim Vance and Cap to hear her talking to somebody to give them a heads up.
So they could stay put, stay hidden.
Stay hidden. They saw him moving, and that's what gave it away.
Yep.
And she had taken them some food that day, just like Patsy Cline had done for her husband Asa. Jim Vance's wife had taken them some victuals up there to the woods. I can just hear them now. "Let's go get something to eat, Jim." No, we better stay up here hunting. Stay hid. Here, we'll get the wife to bring us some victuals up. We'll just have a picnic up here in the woods. Can you imagine how silly that sounds, that these guys just had a massacre on a family 6 days earlier, but they're on a hunting trip, and Nancy McCoy happened to know where they were hunting at. Let's not just, let's talk about Cap. Cap got away like his daddy ran. Tough when in a gang or setting fires, but boy, when it's 1-on-1 or 1-on-20, it's different. Cap was mean when he was in a group, but now he took off running. Now, his wife says, I didn't see that in there. Did we put that? I think it did. It was back
through there.
We
I should have put it, I guess.
Fast forward to back. Look at the statement back there a while ago that I didn't get to read all of it. And it says, "I'll never feel about Cap Hatfield like I once did. He's a coward. He ran on my old man. If I'd been him and been a friend to my old man, I would have stayed and died with him or fought for him."
Yeah, she did say that.
She calls Cap Hatfield a coward herself. All right.
And that's how they organized that and found Cap and Jim Vance that day. Cap got away, but of course Jim Vance did perish that day.
Okay, just let it go. Okay. Just let it run through. These
Yeah,
are
we're
stopping points where we talk.
Probably ahead of schedule.
And then the big indictment came along where in August of 88, it was against the 8 Hatfield families. And what was the outcome of that? The 8 members of the Hatfield, they had the big indictment, and you had Ellison or Cotton Top that ended up, he was hanged. They finally pursued the indictments, and it actually came to pass. And at that time, several of the other 7 received sentences as well.
Yeah, so again, we have to go back to the war between the states. Kentucky governor trying to invade and take West Virginia, right?
I'm not going to bore you guys, Jim. I'm not going to bore you. He said there was 8. In a minute, Jack says 7. There was 9. There was 9 people taken back to Kentucky to stand trial. In fact, let it play, Sheila. I believe you come up with that.
Let's see if it.
The fact that they were coming across the state border, the Tug River, and capturing Hatfields and Hatfield affiliates, we'll say, and pulling them across the river into Kentucky was illegal. Extradition like that did not exist at the time.
Do you want to just let this play here?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the court case Mahon v. Justice ended up going all the way up to the Supreme Court. Mahon was friends and employees of the Hatfields. If I'm not mistaken, it was 2 Mahon brothers. Was part of the 7 that were captured. And again, like you said, it ended up going up to the Supreme Court because there was no such thing as extradition. What's interesting is
he calls them Hatfield affiliates. How about the Hatfield gang? He refers to them as Hatfield family, Hatfield affiliates, or Logan Wildcats. When all through history, especially during that time, in court records and documents and newspapers, they're referred to as the Hatfield gang. going to try to take and invade West Virginia. Jack is still, that was in the first video. It's in the second video. And now it's in the third. That the governor was only interested in invading West Virginia. Civil War's over. Go ahead.
When the next governor of Kentucky went into office.
Stop her right there.
Okay.
There you go, guys. 9 Hatfields lodged in Louisville jail. I guess they must have picked up 2 more along the way somewhere. A squad of men went to Randall McCoy's house and killed one of his sons and a daughter and beat up his old woman. This was charged to the Hatfields, but I never knew anything about it. Sometime after the murders were committed. Shortly after this, a company of Pike County men was formed to follow the Hatfields and kill them. They came to West Virginia and found Crazy Jim Vance and Captain Cap Hatfield on a bridge near Thacker Creek. They shot Vance and wounded Cap. After that, the Kentuckians came in and captured us while we were on our farms. None of us resisted and no injury was done. This is Wall Hatfield's statement. That's Devil Ance's brother, Wall Hatfield. They captured us. We was on our farms and they captured us. Now you'll hear later on where he says, once again, Wall Hatfield turned himself in. That's Wall Hatfield's own statement right there. And the 9 Hatfields, or the Hatfield gang, were lodged in Louisville jail. Guess who helped escort them to Louisville, Kentucky after they were arrested in West Virginia? Randall McCoy himself. Some people says Randall McCoy never led nobody anywhere. Well, he helped lead those 9 to Louisville to put them in jail there for protection.
Okay, let's see.
Brothers was part of the 7 that were captured. And again, like you said, it ended up going up to the Supreme Court because there was no.
Just for your information, the Mayhorns were actually the son-in-laws of Valentine Wall Hatfield.
Exactly.
Both Pliant and Doc Mayhorn had married Wall Hatfield's daughters. They were in prison with Wall Hatfield after they were sentenced. But go ahead.
Such thing as extradition. What's interesting is when the next governor of Kentucky went into office, he ended up pardoning and releasing the Mahon brothers. Because I guess he knew it was a political battle that was being fought, by the prior governor.
Okay.
Wow.
Who was that governor, Jack? Who was that governor that pardoned the Mahons? Eddyville Prisoner Description Book, 1889, 1910, roll numbers. Eddyville Frankfort Prison, Cell House Register, 1883 to 1919. Prison Sentence Register, 1874 to 1894. Description, Frankfort Prisoners. Who was that governor? Pardoning and released the Mahon brothers, because see, the Mahons got out of prison 14 years after they were sentenced. 14 years they served. Somebody said one time Johnsy Hatfield saved a governor or saved a warden and got out of prison real early. No, he served 13 years. Johnsy did. 13, 14. All these guys served about the same amount of time. About 14 years was the average for Alex Messer and all of them. 14 years. No governor came in and pardoned. Do you, once again, Jack says that he likes, she's kicking me.
Yeah.
Jack says that he likes proof. He likes documentation. We do too. Where's the proof? Where's the documentation that Mahons was pardoned when the next governor come in a year later? Where is that pardon? Where's the newspaper article? You would think that America's bloodiest feud, Hatfields and McCoys, and 2 of the murderers and went to court, stood trial, found guilty, sentenced, and delivered to prison. And now the governor's going to come in, a new governor, and pardon them. Who is that governor? Where is that? Those newspaper articles. Where are those court documents? Says it's all political. Said that the new governor that come in knew that it was all political, and that's why he pardoned the Mahons. Had nothing to do with politics, had nothing to do with political, Jack. Had to do with killing 3 young boys, tying them up trees, had to do with burning a cabin, killing 2 more, had to do with justice. They stood trial,
Exactly.
and a jury found them guilty, and they were sentenced to prison, and they served 14 years. Go ahead.
You know, there was, and unfortunately, yeah, the Supreme Court ruled he was hung, and he was buried in an unmarked grave over in Pikeville. And then Devilance's brother, the judge, turned himself in, who was part of that as well. And he died in prison a year later of natural causes. So they actually also put him in a...
Died a year later of natural causes. She'll show you you'll see that jail log in a minute.
Yeah.
He reported to jail January the 2nd. He died February the 13th, a month later.
Right.
Not a year later, not 5 years later, a month later. A lot of difference in a month and a year.
Mm-hmm. And the person he was talking before that was Cotton Top, in case they didn't know when he said that.
Cotton Top says that Cotton Top was illegitimate. He's illegitimate from Ellison Hatfield, his father, and Harriet Hatfield, Ellison's first cousin. Harriet Hatfield was the sister to Hog Still and Floyd. Harriet was Hog Still and Floyd's sister. Hog Still and Floyd. Harriet and Ellison Hatfield were first cousins. Ellison Hatfield, a lot of people the Hatfields always wanted to refer to him as Ellison Mounts.
Mm-hmm.
Ellison Cotton Top Mounts. Not a Mounts. He's a Hatfield. He was never adopted. She married a Mounts, but that didn't make him a Mounts. He was a Hatfield. He's Ellison Hatfield's son, illegitimate son.
He signed his statement as Ellison Hatfield.
Yeah, a couple of times.
Yeah. He signed all of his paperwork as
I find it interesting that West Virginia Hatfields always leave out anything that could damage a reputation or anything. It's not part, that's history. Whether Randall McCoy got married at 70, 80 years old,
yeah,
or whatever. It's history, no matter good, bad, or the ugly. We've got to tell it on both sides.
Yeah.
There was another set of cousins. Cap Hatfield married his first cousin, Nancy Hatfield. Mm-hmm. Devilance's son and Devilance's sister's daughter were married after her first husband was killed from the bush. Somebody murdered her first husband from the bush. They always thought it was Cap Hatfield that done that, so he could have his wife, his first cousin. I'm thinking someone else out there was first cousins and got married, but I can't.
Really?
Yeah, I can't recall it right now.
Guys, it was Randall and Sarah McCoy.
Exactly. Thank you, babe. Exactly. We don't care, guys, if it's Hatfield or McCoy.
He's just being silly there.
We'll tell the history on both. We don't.
Good, bad, no.
Randall and Sarah was first cousins.
Yeah.
Just like Nancy and Cap, Ellison and Harriet.
Mm-hmm.
But why does certain people want to leave stuff like that out unless it's on the other family? We tell it on both families.
That's right.
Devilance's brother, the judge, had turned himself in. I think that's coming up here. Go ahead.
Mark grave. So unfortunately, those two don't even have a headstone.
Unfortunately, those two don't even have a headstone. Ellison Hatfield, Devilance's nephew, Ellison, his brother's son. Mm-hmm. So it would be Devilance's nephew and his first cousin or something. But he's buried in an unmarked grave. Why? Because Devilance didn't care enough to send him with that $5 million He didn't care enough to send somebody to Pikeville with $20 and say, hey, go over and bring my nephew back home. Let me give him a proper burial. We've done sacrificed them. We've done let them die for us. Let's go give them a burial instead of putting them in an unmarked grave. Devil Anse, this great, loving, compassionate uncle and brother, didn't do that. What about Wall? Wall died in prison a month later.
Yeah.
And he died of either TB, pneumonia, or he starved himself to death. Now, the brothers, the Mahon brothers, when they got out, they said that Wall just couldn't handle prison life.
Right.
He quit eating. He just couldn't handle being locked up. Remember, at one time, he was the justice of the peace also. He knew better than to get involved with Devil Anse and what it cost him, and Devil Anse is still free. So he resented Devil Anse. But he either died of starvation, TB, or pneumonia while he was in prison. He's buried in an unmarked grave, or he was years ago. He was buried in the prison cemetery because he went as unclaimed. Nobody in the family claimed him to pick his remains up. They buried him in an unmarked grave in the prison yard.
Right.
And later on, in years past, they took that prison yard and they moved a bunch of bodies out of the way. But the part that he was in was not fooled with. So he's underneath the parking lot down there in Pikeville somewhere. There's a parking lot where he's now buried at. All because his loving brother refused to send somebody to pick him up. Funny how anything bad about Devil Anse or West Virginia Hatfields never gets brought up. So where did all this come from? It came from animosity. Let's go ahead. Let's listen to what they say here.
Okay.
On our gravesite to be remembered by today, and they were key.
Okay, now this
That's okay. Leave that. You can
that's
pause it a
Frank
minute.
Phillips.
Did you? Okay.
Oh, I thought you.
The first one was the legal document, the original document from the Pike County courts. And then she's transcribed it here where you can read it, but it says Frank Phillips was paid $100 reward bounty by the courts for the arrest of Valentine Wall Hatfield. This puts to rest that these stories over the years, that's what I'm saying. That's what the document says, is that Frank Phillips was paid $100. And that was a court paper where it's authorizing him to be paid $100. Now, do you think they paid Frank Phillips $100 for the arrest of Valentine Wall Hatfield? And Wall Hatfield said that they come to his fields. They were working in the fields and arrested him, but nobody was harmed. Frank Phillips was Valentine Wall Hatfield was arrested.
He was. They're trying to say that he turned himself in, but he didn't.
He did not turn himself in. There's the court document that proves it. Go ahead.
See
Sorry.
the next one. Sorry, I didn't get to stop the other one
You're all right.
fast enough. There he is.
There's Wall Hatfield. That's Devil Anse's brother. Wall Hatfield convicted of murdering the three McCoys. He's sentenced. This is a New York newspaper, September the 5th, at Pikeville, Kentucky. Special judge says the trial of Wall Hatfield has been concluded. The jury found him guilty of being an accessory to the act of murdering the three McCoy boys. Tolbert, 29, Randall, 15 years old, and Farmer, 19. He was sentenced to the penitentiary for life. These trials are a result of the Hatfield McCoy Feud, which has caused so much terror on the Kentucky-West Virginia line during the last decade. It would be difficult to assert just how many lives have been sacrificed in the famous vendetta. Well, there was 12 that was killed during the feud, but there were several that had died during these years.
Right.
William, Rosanna's baby,
Right.
several people had died during those years. Maybe not
Cora, the little granddaughter.
Cora, which was Tolbert's daughter from the cabin burning.
Mark Barney, yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead, babe.
Oh.
That's Wall.
That's when he went into prison.
January the 2nd, when he arrived in prison, 56 years old.
Yeah.
Tells his height and his weight.
And this one here shows where he's passed.
February 13th, died in prison. buried in the prison cemetery.
Wow.
That's the book. That's the log book from the Kentucky State Penitentiary at that time. This is what you call documentation, guys. And there's just some stories if you want to pause your TV in a minute and read a little bit about it. That's either out our book or on our wall in the museum.